cryptos and securities, like I've said it before, like, you know, call a spade, but don't take my spade away from me, in reference to, of course, securities. And the idea there is essentially that, yes, to a certain extent, if we do the Howey test on a lot of tokens, on a lot of different cryptocurrencies, but tokens in particular, right, you end up in a spot where it's pretty clear that traditionally defined, it does seem to fail the Howey test, meaning that a lot of tokens and cryptos are securities. But they do set themselves apart. So I prefer that there's not as much regulation around cryptocurrency in general, especially, or even if they are, you know, deemed a security at the end of the day. So it gets a little tricky, but then the question is, does that really matter, right? And so we have an opinion piece here from CoinDesk, and I wanted to go over it with you guys. So when a main U.S. regulatory body defers to crypto Twitter for leads on security laws violations, you know these categories are subjective, and I think that is going to be kind of the point of this. So he did go on to say that he is working on an article, the writer of this particular opinion piece surrounding proof of stake and proof of work, and we will be taking a look at that article when he finishes it. I'm pretty excited about that. But since a proper proof of stake and proof of work piece deserves a lot of careful, deep thought that I'm incapable of at the moment, he says, let's instead focus on two players that are writing the narrative for Coinbase and the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission. On July 26th, it emerged that Coinbase was being probed by the SEC for allegedly listing securities. This news came on the heels of an insider trading case brought against a Coinbase employee and two others on July 21st by the SEC and the U.S. Justice Department. Making matters somehow worse, Kathy Wood's ARK Invest offloaded 1.4 million Coinbase shares on July 27th. Woof, he says. It has been tough sledding for Coinbase since it went public last April, and the latest obstacle on its most recent downhill slide is securities law. Everyone's favorite. No, I won't make any assertions of if Ether is a security or not, but I will make the assertion that it doesn't matter. And I think that, I'll just put it this way, Ethereum being a security is a lot more likely when it moves to proof of stake. We'll go into that in another video, but a lot of people need to be aware of the way proof of stake functions versus proof of work. With proof of work, you do have essentially electricity costs is going in there. You have work being done that is being rewarded. Proof of stake specifically only rewards people for holding or basically purchasing and holding Ethereum, right? And so you end up putting yourself into a securities. You are not actually doing any work. You're not actually solving any work being done. There's no commodity being traded there. There's a commodity being traded for the work being done. Essentially, once you move into proof of stake, you move yourself into a security portion. And I bet he'll probably talk about that in his proof of work versus proof of stake article. So he's saying, though, that it doesn't matter. So let's get into why he says it doesn't matter. So first, Coinbase. Coinbase is one of crypto's non-token real business success stories. Founded in 2012 as a means to easily and securely send, buy, and receive Bitcoin, Coinbase has been since expanded far beyond its roots and now hopes to become the Amazon of assets and list every asset out there in crypto that's legal. It went public in April of 2021, and it was a huge deal, debuting on NASDAQ with a valuation of $100 billion US. Turns out that Coin going public marked the top of not only crypto markets, but also the company. Aside from its dismal stock price performance, down 81%, Coinbase is also losing in the court of public opinion. Earlier this month, I wrote about how Coinbase was going public led to an imperative on consistent infinite earnings or revenue growth, which further led to an immense expansion in the headcount. This all culminated in this, quote, an absolute public relation nightmare when Coinbase cut back on hiring in May, which rolled into rescinding new job offers. Remember this, guys? The blowback in turn led to a pointed tweet thread from co-founder and CEO Brian Armstrong urging dissenters to quit, following an employee petition to remove executives from the company, which was then followed promptly by the exchange laying off 18% of its workforce, end quote. Buried in that same piece was a link to a tweet thread by one Jordan Fish, aka Kobe, an early Bitcoiner who invests in crypto projects and co-hosts the Up Only TV podcast. I follow Kobe on Twitter. He is a pretty good source of information, at least on Twitter. I don't really necessarily listen to the podcast, to be honest, because I don't have time. I have listened to it. I do like his Twitter a lot, though, so definitely go give him a follow there, in which he outlined how many of Coinbase's asset listing suggestions seemed questionable. And we covered this as well last week. Kobe has posted several tweets and tweet threads about questionable practices across crypto. He even found someone, thanks to the transparency of the Ethereum blockchain, who bought tokens just before they were listed in a Coinbase asset listing. The blog post where Coinbase outlines the assets it is considering to support on its platform. Assets that get listed on Coinbase usually spike in price shortly afterward. And this is something about crypto that, we've been talking about for a while, and that's all of these coins, when they get listed, they do pump. And that is why speculative mining can be particularly advantageous. And speculative mining, the reason I always say that it can't be already listed, you can't already have a price listing for it, is because the speculative part means you get that pump when you get the initial listing. And that is almost always a guaranteed pump. And then, of course, if you get additional larger exchange listings after that. So you would have like an exchange hierarchy list, right? Maybe Trade Ogre at the bottom, something along those lines. And then your Coinbases and your Crypto.coms at the top for the large spikes. Typically in the life of a coin, you would have at the beginning some small exchange listing, and that would be right after the network launch and has been stable for a little bit. The speculative mining would happen before it was listed at all. You'll have that boost, your initial price bump. You'll see it go up on the chart the day of, and then it'll come back down and settle out. And then later on, when they hit a bigger exchange, you'll see another spike that will give you a new all-time high, and they'll come back down a little bit and then go straight and flat for a little bit longer. So if you were aware of listings for large exchanges like Coinbase or Crypto.com, you could obviously perform some sort of insider trading, which is going on at Coinbase here, and what the problem is, and purchase that particular coin before it's listed on Coinbase, knowing for a fact that it will go up in price just from the listing itself. Assets that get listed on Coinbase usually spike in price shortly afterwards, so there was something potentially fishy, as it were, given how obscure some of the considered tokens were. This same tweet, and I cannot believe this is true, was cited by the Justice Department in its July 21st press release, charging a Coinbase employee with an insider trading tipping scheme. Here's where it gets interesting. According to U.S. law, insider trading happens when individuals trade securities based on a confidential or non-public information. But Coinbase lists cryptocurrencies, and cryptocurrencies have been operating in a regulatory gray area for some time now, meaning that the definition of insider trading means that essentially it has to be deemed a security for it to be considered insider trading, right? So because it's in a gray area where it's not a security, technically the Justice Department will have to define any given token that's been traded in this manner, right? That's been manipulated essentially, or bought before the listing as a security before they could press charges on these people. The SEC in this lawsuit specifically called 9 cryptocurrencies securities. For the record, I had heard of exactly one of them before this case came to light. This means there's probably a path forward where a meaningful number of cryptos gets tagged as securities in the US, which nudges us towards our main topic, securities law, And I hope to learn something here because I do not know much about securities law. And we're going to go through this and hopefully get a better idea, right? At least a top down, high level. Nick D, CoinDesk's managing editor for global policy and regulation, is far more well equipped to talk about all the things SEC. So you should check out his work if you want to dive deeper. He wrote a great article in this newsletter about the SEC and crypto last week. You can check the link for this article, for the hyperlink to that article in the description below. I'm not going to opine on specific projects, partially because that is not my job, but mostly because it really doesn't matter in the abstract. At the center of a lot of internet debates lies a seemingly simple question. Is this cryptocurrency a security? I submit that this doesn't matter philosophically and that it only matters practically because of laws and stuff. So he says, stay with me. Yes, the SEC is tasked with enforcing laws against market manipulation to protect investors. And yes, that is a valiant purpose. But contending that market manipulation only matters in the context of securities is exactly wrong. Bitcoin, legally deemed a commodity in the US, market manipulation should be stomped out as well. If the SEC decided tomorrow that Bitcoin was a security, it would change nothing about Bitcoin fundamentally. It would also change nothing about Bitcoin market manipulation being bad. It would just change who thinks they can regulate it at this particular moment. And this is where it's really funny, but this is kind of where the nation state, or the federal government, the SEC, this is where they all fall short, especially when it comes to digital assets, right? You put yourself in a position where the cryptocurrency moves so fast and the digital transformation is moving so quickly that in a lot of cases, these people can't make laws fast enough and change them quickly enough and figure out the definitions of what they are to properly regulate it. So at the end of the day, whether you deem it a security or not really doesn't matter because they're still going to have to go through these same processes. I think, though, he makes a very valid point here to where any market manipulation, whether deemed a commodity or a security, should be, of course, resulted here. Moving back to this, the idea is essentially you do not have to necessarily deem it a security, you shouldn't have to deem it a security to worry about market manipulation. There we go. All right, let's continue it. So that's the idea of the article, right? So no, it doesn't matter whether Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Dogecoin, or AVAX are deemed securities. The SEC cites the Howey test when determining whether something is a security. While the agency has said in the past that Bitcoin is not a security, and while I'm not a lawyer, one can make the argument that the test sure makes Bitcoin look a lot like a security because investing in Bitcoin, one requires money, fiat money, but still money, unless you're a miner, and even that requires money to pay the power bills. Yeah, except you're paying the power bill. All right, so I think I disagree with him on this. Or one of the diehard merchants who receive it in exchange for goods and services. 2, which is invested in a common enterprise, the Bitcoin network. And 3, with a reasonable expectation for profit. Maybe unreasonable, but if Bitcoin demonized gold, the price of Bitcoin would go up. Or 4, derived from the efforts of others. I hold Bitcoin and I haven't once touched the code. Got it. Okay. And that doesn't matter one bit philosophically. It only matters practically because investors, institutional and individual, need to play by the SEC rules. Otherwise, they go to jail or get fined. But Bitcoin is still freedom money, gold 2.0, or a reserve asset, even if a government agency says it's a security. Though, again, it hasn't. Of course, if this practically applies to you specifically, then yes, it does matter. In that case, you should weigh the probability of Bitcoin or Ether being labeled as securities, which seems low at this point, and weigh the probability of other cryptocurrencies being labeled as securities, which seems higher at this point after the insider trading suit against Coinbase. Not because it changes why you're investing, but rather it governs if you even can invest, or at least whether you can without using a VPN. We did do a video on that. If you guys want to check out the VPN video and what cryptocurrency people use VPNs for, definitely go check that video out. Last bit that I absolutely have to mention before tying this question back to Coinbase. It only matters in the United States, and that's very relevant. Most people, in case you haven't noticed, don't live in the United States. U.S. securities laws shouldn't and don't directly affect my uncle in Greece. Back to Coinbase and Kobe's tweet thread that was cited by the Justice Department. The real issue with the front running of a potential Coinbase listing by an employee and the questionable assets it was considering for listing wasn't that assets in question were securities. The issue is ethical. First, employees First, employees at an exchange with that much sway over the price of an asset shouldn't trade on material, non-public information, whether or not the asset is deemed a security by the SEC. I'm not suggesting that this should be illegal. I'm saying that it is ethically bad. Second, and more important, Coinbase has a moral responsibility to ensure for its largely retail customer base that crypto assets it lists, whether the government considers them securities, commodities, or condiments, aren't best defined as valueless vaporware. Its failure to do so is the main problem, and therein lies the true challenge for a company incentivized to hit quarterly numbers. So what did we learn, right? We learned essentially the idea that practically it really doesn't matter if a cryptocurrency is defined as a security or not for a couple reasons. One, and philosophically, it only affects essentially the way the United States perceives it and regulates it, right? And then two, that in general, this doesn't determine how the entire world, the rest of the world, deems it. So as far as like on the base layer of what cryptocurrency is, it's only one little segment of the entire population that can influence it if deemed a security. Now, like I've talked about before, we can call a spade here, and I think pretty much, in my opinion, anything that's proof of stake fails the Howey test at this point. I've given my reasons, and I actually pushed back on his definition of why Bitcoin could be considered a security based on the proof of work mechanism behind it. But, you know, at the end of the day, I still do think primarily if we are looking at most proof of stake coins, they could be deemed a security. Does that matter at the end of the day if you're looking at trying to invest in a project? Only if you are governed by the US, right? Which is another interesting point to take into consideration. Then we get into the entire philosophy of cryptocurrency completely dissolving the nation state. And if that was to be the case 10 to 50 years down the line, then none of this actually ends up mattering at the end of the day anyways. I don't know. It was a fun article. Let me know what you think in the comment section in the live chat. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. You can check out the full episode here or more crypto content down here. Also, I'd like you to check out my locals page at sonofatech.locals.com where you can become a member for free or choose to be a $5 a month supporter that unlocks additional content.